Welcome to the News9 Plus show on the world's first news and current affairs OTT platform, News9 Plus. Let's start with what's making news. I want to introduce my guest for this evening, Lt Gen PJS Pannu, former Deputy Chief of the Headquarters Integrated Defence Staff. General Pannu, welcome to the News9 Plus show.
Thank you, Sandeep, for getting me over for this show. I think the world is looking at very interesting developments which are happening, and I think it has far-reaching effects, and the impact is small or big. Everybody is trying to mitigate what is going to happen. So I think there is a huge amount of anxiety to know how it is going to unfold.
What's going on right now in the Middle East, General Pannu? Are we dialing down on the threat of a war? As of 2 days back, a ground invasion appeared imminent, and now we're hearing a lot of talks of peace. President Biden is visiting, the German Chancellor is visiting Israel. So what's going on?
Sandeep, if you look at the small region, you can call it west or east. I think it lies between the two. That is why it keeps getting called Middle East. But the point here is that a small, strategically important area has been historically an area of conflict.
And a crossroads of civilization.
It is on the crossroads of civilization, through which also flows huge amount of sea traffic.
Right.
Using the Suez Canal. Having seen the developments which have happened over years, I think Jerusalem being the center point of focus for the religion, and then the areas of settlements which have come along over a period of time with Jews coming in, where the Palestinians were present in one way or the other, people can keep talking about, of their origin. And currently with the settlements in West Bank and Gaza, there have been ups and downs and pushes and pulls, politically, diplomatically, militarily. But on 7th October, what has happened has been unprecedented, because this attack by Hamas, which is also a ruling party, seen as a terrorist organization, has done something, I think, which is beyond anybody's expectation.
Right.
And I think more so, while the globe was surprised, I think Israelis themselves, who were supposed to be always watching across,
right,
were also surprised. And this is one big jolt, I suppose everybody has, more so the Israelis, because they were using technology, known for intelligence, but were completely surprised on a holiday when Hamas stuck with rockets and also physical ground attacks at a number of places in an unconventional way. So really, if you look at the stakeholders around, I think you can very clearly tier them. In the first tier is Hamas.
Right.
In the north, in the Lebanon, is the Hezbollah. You can say the Shia-Sunni complexions, but also there is a mix there, because supporters of Shias are Sunnis and Sunnis are Shias. Here, the whole story starts getting very complicated.
You used a very interesting term earlier when we were speaking. You said there's a lot of speed dating going on right now. Lots of people are moving around, leaders are moving around. President Putin has landed up in China and he's meeting Xi Jinping, their Chinese president, and then you have Joe Biden in the Middle East. And very interestingly, sir, he's visiting Jordan and Egypt, but not Saudi Arabia. Why do you think that's the case?
See, I think Saudi Arabia has been visited at the diplomatic level.
Right.
And
by Secretary Blinken.
Secretary Blinken has gone there.
Gone through the region, 7 visits.
Yeah.
And as many countries.
So either the political leadership or the diplomatic representation in the speed dating is trying to settle the matter.
Right.
Where the stakeholders being directly the Israelis and the Hamas in Palestine. But I think there are larger stakeholders on the outer tier.
Right, right.
And you look at, if you start from the south, Egyptians are stakeholders but passive,
right,
now active.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, onlooker but very concerned, because it has got deep repercussions on how they play up.
Right.
Jordan, in proximity very close, but I suppose in opinion little distant. Syria, little more active, and Lebanon, of course, is right across, trying to do what worst can happen, I think would take advantage of it. So, but the distant tier, where you can look at is what the Russians are thinking and doing, and
China
what
and
the
Russia,
Chinese are
Beijing
thinking and doing.
The Beijing-Moscow axis.
Beijing-Moscow axis, and also the Indian outlook on the entire global affairs, the churn which has taken, because earlier people were only talking about one conflict in Ukraine.
Right.
And I think all of a sudden it has jerked the attention of the world away from Ukraine
Right.
to Israel, Hamas, Gaza.
There's a potential second conflict.
And the second conflict is now, I think, having a deeper concern on the outcome of any expansion which can happen. I think it can have very deep-rooted, immediate and long-term effect on the world. And I suppose this is now a priority sector for the entire world. That is where the whole concern lies.
Well, you know, President Biden was asked about this, about can the US handle two conflicts? And he said something that, you know, of course, we are the strongest country in all of history, you know, we can handle two conflicts. What do you think is the possibility of a third conflict breaking out? Possibly, as you said, the powers on the outside, Beijing is watching this very carefully. Do you think they'd make a move for Taiwan while the world is occupied with Ukraine and Russia and with the Middle East, Israel?
Certain things that does not meet the eye immediately.
Right.
Obviously, many strategic actions are beyond the visual range. So, who is a direct beneficiary of making America run from one quarter to another?
Right.
Is directly China, because China is actually in a race to cross America and claim the #1 slot in the world.
Absolutely.
Faster it does it, better it is.
They also have their Amrit Kal goal. We have an Amrit Kal goal of reaching a developed nation thing. I think their Amrit Kal goal is to outstrip the US.
Outstrip the US.
By 2048.
Absolutely. And if you really see how the Russian and the Chinese axis is developing, Iran more or less in the fold, Turkey opportunistic in that direction, the North Korea trains running to Russia, and certain amount of material which has already gone from Afghanistan, which is American, gone to the Palestine, Hamas.
Absolutely,
I think all that is visible is being spoken about.
Right.
And anything which is invisible is something that one can largely attribute to a good logic.
Right.
To say that maybe another front is ready only to test how far the Americans can run. Right. And if the Americans can run to all those quarters, I suppose matters would be settled. And I suppose whoever blinks first can also make a mistake. So it is an era where anybody who makes a strategic blunder will get trapped.
Absolutely. So this aim, as you said, is to make sure the Americans keep running and, you know, to test them out, to possibly even wear them out. So conflict, from the looks of it, the hectic diplomacy that's been underway in the last 48 hours, if not more, doesn't appear to be on the cards as of now. Right? I don't think it's a war, doesn't seem to be in anyone's interest. The kind of war that we are talking of is a war of annihilation. Your former colleagues that we were speaking to were saying the same thing, that look, the kind of operation that they see, a ground invasion, I mean, the kind of death toll that would result from a ground invasion would be in the tens of thousands. I mean, you think that is one thing that's holding everyone back?
I think a couple of things are holding the forces of various countries back, and that too, when you talk about Israel, who actually declared that I am going to have a war which is on three fronts, that is three planes of ground, air and sea. Largely, the other players, direct military actors in this, are now Americans moving their two carrier groups in that area. Now, these strike groups are actually meant for deterrent, basically to prevent a war from happening. More they posture, better the outcome in limiting the conflict.
Right. So in this case, the Americans would move the strike groups, you think, to keep the Iranians away, to tell them, listen, don't interfere. Because I think the flying time from the Mediterranean to Iran, it's all the carrier strike group aircraft can fly to Iran and back.
I really wonder if the Iranians are ready for a conventional military involvement here.
Right.
Whatever will happen through proxy.
Which is what they've warned of, this proxies they're going to activate all over.
Yes. So if the proxies are to be kept under check,
Right.
I think the presence of Americans are just about ensuring that
Right.
A, we are watching, and secondly, we are ready to react. And I suppose they are looking from both sides certain conditions to be met, where either they can exchange the hostages.
Right.
There are international hostages also. It
Yeah.
is not only that the Israelis have the hostages.
The American hostages.
The American hostages are also there. So I suppose all the political dating and diplomatic dating is aiming to limit the conflict and settle the matter by returning the hostage situation, bringing it back to where it was.
Right.
But I suppose the Palestinians in Gaza Strip, as you say, Hamas, and Palestinian people have had enough beating already.
Right.
Now to further push them into the sea or push them into a situation of human misery and to be branded as those who've committed genocide, I think the Israelis are going to be very, very chary of that, not to be branded as those who've committed
absolutely.
huge
But there is also
catastrophe.
tremendous pressure on Netanyahu, on his government, the fact that there are so many Israelis held hostage. And in fact, our reporter Neha Khanna spoke to the family of one of the IDF soldiers who's been held hostage, the mother of one of those soldiers. Let's listen into what she has to say.
Joining me on News9 Live today is another mother from Israel who is desperately and anxiously waiting for her son to return home safely. My heartfelt condolences over all the loss of lives in Israel, and I'm really sorry to hear about your son. Please tell our viewers about your son. Tell us about Ron. Who is he? What happened? How did he get captured by the Hamas? What happened that day?
First of all, Ron is as you said, he is a 19-year-old boy. He is a soldier now. As you know, all children in Israel, after they finish high school, they have to serve the army, the military service. Ron has asthma, a very severe one. So he served as a defense soldier in the border with the Gaza Strip. His job was to help the economy of the Gazan population by he was one of he was in charge on the traders that bring the goods inside Israel and back to the Gaza Strip. He loved his job. He loved he was always happy. As a student, he was happy. This is something that is very, we hope it will help him where he is now. And our nightmare started on the morning of Saturday at 6:30 in the morning. Ron stayed in the base during that weekend. He started texting us at 6:30 in the morning and said that he thought was a heavy missile attack on the base. He was sleeping and when it started, so he ran with his t-shirt and shorts and flip-flops to the shelter. It's not exactly a shelter as you imagine it. It's something like a concrete wall that serves their soldiers during the missiles attack. And he ran there and he started texting us that he was very worried because it sounded different this time. And he actually recorded us also a few videos. And I heard it, and I know the missiles because we live in we know the sounds of the missiles from Gaza because we live very close to the Gazan border and we are used to this, unfortunately. And it sounded different. I knew it wasn't missiles, but I didn't know what it was. Afterwards, we understood it was grenades and bombings and all kinds of ammunition the terrorists used in order to get into the base. But it was very, it sounded very, very loud, and he was terrified. And I told him, just stay there in this shield, in this in this concrete wall. And he asked me maybe I should go back to the dormitories where where I'm sleeping, and I said no, stay there. And after a while, he wrote to me, texted me, Mom, they said that there are terrorists inside the base. And I have to admit, I didn't believe him. I thought he was just imagining things. It sounded unreal. And I told him, just, it can't be. It's impossible. And after a while, he texted me everything. He just wrote me, I hear Arabic language outside the shelter. They are outside, they are coming to take me. I love you, Mom, and lots of red hearts. And his last words were, it's over. And that's it. And at this time, as you can imagine, we thought it was really over, because we thought he was dead. We tried, nobody told us anything. We tried to call, whoever we can, but we didn't get any answer from anybody at this stage. After 5 hours, I think the worst in my life is really the worst in any parent's life could be. Suddenly we received the videos that the Hamas posted, that you can see Ron clearly, very healthy, alive, walking, he was taken as a hostage and taken to the Gaza Strip by barefoot. He didn't have he was just walking without it, because in his t-shirt and shorts. But he looked fine. He looked okay. He was kidnapped, alive and uninjured, and it was a kind of a relief for us. Although your son is held by a terrorist group, but at that moment it was a relief, because we knew he was alive, and until now we have hope, and this is very important for us.
You are a brave woman, and you have to be strong for Ron's sake. And we all hope and pray that he'll return home to you safely at the earliest. Our thoughts and prayers are with you and all the hostages and their families.
I mean, that tells you the kind of public opinion that's building up in favor of the hostages. So I think the Israeli government would be very careful on moving ahead with the fact that, like you mentioned, that not only foreign hostages, but there are 200 plus Israeli hostages being held captive by Hamas. How do you see this operation playing out now? The best case scenario, as you mentioned, is a hostage swap, as in you have peace talks. And the worst case scenario would be this war of annihilation that they've been promising. Is there a middle path there somewhere, or how do you see this landing up? Which side will it fall on?
We have to make certain assumptions when we look at various options. Assumption one is when Hamas refuses to hand over the hostage, right, and continue to demand, which get unreasonable, and the Israelis start losing the patience, and then they decide to go in for a ground offensive.
Right.
Now, ground offensive is going to be hugely complicated because of the civilian population already impacted very badly. The hospitals are full.
Right.
The children are homelessly running around with some older family members either dead or wounded, trying to get some shelter or food, which is a very, very difficult situation for them.
So it's a hostage situation. In fact, it's like a double hostage situation, if I may. It's like you have the one hostage is captured by the Hamas, and then you have the civilians who are kind of held hostage by Hamas and by this encirclement by the Israeli forces.
Yes. So if one had to decide on going in for a military campaign or military offensive, I suppose the Israelis would not have a large campaign on the entire Gaza.
Right.
They will pick and choose.
Right.
And they will make segments out of it and clear one segment and then go for the next segment.
Right. So they won't go all in at once.
Unlikely, because then the situation of genocide or huge amount of casualty and the world opinion will also complicate. In any case, the hostage, they don't even know geographically where exactly the hostage are being held. So if they are held in one geographical area and they start attacking it, they would land up killing their own. So I suppose more information will come to prevent, because they're going to use the hostages as human shield.
Right.
And now imagine a situation if Hamas has handed over the hostages and now are attacked and there's no human shield.
Right.
So they would have lost that leverage. So I suppose it is going to be extremely complicated, and Hamas also knows that to prevent the military offensive to unfold in a way as it would really make mincemeat out of them, they have to use hostages. So it's going to be a tall order.
Right.
So therefore, the Israelis will have to separate the people, the innocent civilians, the terrorists and the hostages in one way or the other by selecting small geographical areas. Maybe use technology and intelligence to go into those areas.
There,
maybe select a few areas of tunnels, maybe using technology like robos, getting into tunnels, because getting into a tunnel is very, very messy. Once you get out of it, you don't know how to get out of it.
Absolutely. In fact, you just mentioned the tunnels. Our executive editor, National Security, Aditya Raj Kaul, as a explainer on these tunnels that we are calling the Gaza Metro. Let's watch that.
Gaza over the last 2 weeks has become the flashpoint of a deadly war between Israel and Hamas terror group after terror attacks in southern Israel on 7th of October. Over 3,000 people have been killed in Gaza in Israeli airstrikes, while over 1,300 have been killed in Israel due to the terror attacks. Hamas in Gaza over the years has built a massive network of underground tunnels, often used to carry out attacks in Israel and smuggle goods from Egypt. Yet, mostly, it is used to let Hamas carry out its operations through underground command centers, which are also equipped to store and transport men and ammunition. Here, right behind me, you can get a glimpse of the map of these underground tunnels all across. In fact, in November 2022, I was a part of a delegation where the Israeli Defense Forces and the Israeli government had invited me to visit all the border areas. In fact, this was one of the areas near Sderot, around the southern Israel, where I had visited and in fact gone inside a tunnel that Hamas had really constructed, along with concrete, electricity, to in fact store ammunition and also send in terrorists into Israel for terror attacks. In 2021, Hamas had claimed to have built a tunnel network of over 500 kilometers, which is more than the size of the Delhi metro network. This massive network of tunnels used by the Hamas terrorists is known as the Gaza Metro. These tunnels are mostly built manually using basic tools, and yet there is electricity within these tunnels and the structure is solidified using concrete, as I said before. Tunnels have been an integral part of the warfare in the past as well. In the mountains of Afghanistan, both the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban have often used shelter within the tunnels. During the Vietnam War as well, the Viet Cong tunnels were used by the Vietnamese in the jungles of Southeast Asia. It was impossible for the US Army to enter these tunnels due to the sheer size of it. Hamas once again has been using these tunnels since the war with Israel has begun. You can see this is the tunnel which is being used continuously by the Hamas terrorists. It's a very narrow passageway which is very dark, but there is electricity at some ends. And on the other hand, you can see these rockets as well that have been kept to attack the Israeli Defense Forces. And IDF has also accused the Hamas of hiding inside these tunnels and often using civilians in Gaza as human shields. These tunnels are often difficult to navigate because of its maze-like structure and booby traps by the Hamas all along the passageway. Israel, however, is all set to now launch a massive ground assault inside Gaza to crush Hamas. Almost 4 lakh troops and reservists on ground have been mobilized for the same. The Israeli Defense Forces would also be using bunker busters or laser-guided bombs, also known as GBU-28, to demolish the underground tunnels or any targets hidden far below the surface. The bunker buster is a 19-feet-long explosive developed by the United States, which goes underneath the ground before exploding. It would, however, be a challenging ground assault because Hamas is currently holding nearly 200 Israeli and foreign hostages who could have been kept in these tunnels as well.
Aditya, those tunnels will never cease to fascinate me. I mean, they spent all this time preparing for this kind of a conflict by literally drilling underground. What are your sources telling you right now about the hostage situation in Gaza, Aditya?
As of now, we are being told that there are more than 200 hostages that have been kept for the last more than 10 days. Some of them unfortunately have died. Hamas has released a video of a particular hostage and
Yes.
said that there was a surgery that was performed on her because she had injuries in her arm. And there's a video that she asks her government, the Israeli government, to rescue her as soon as possible.
Yes, there is a video, but we are not going to be playing that. We don't want to be playing out Hamas propaganda. But that's very important because it suggests that they are going to drip feed these videos, Aditya, over the next couple of days to pressurize the Israeli government.
Absolutely. The propaganda has been underway. The Hamas has a huge propaganda network in the dark web and otherwise. We've seen from the West, from the Middle East also, a lot of support coming in for Hamas, unfortunately defending even the terror attack that happened in Israel on Saturday. What we need to also realize is that nobody knows the location of most of these hostages. The Israel government has said, we know location of some, but not all. So that's going to be a complicated operation once the ground assault really begins. As we know, 22 foreigners as well as Israelis have already died. The US government has said that at least 14 of them, the 14 of the hostages are American citizens. Rishi Sunak yesterday came in and said that at least 10 to 14 of the British citizens are unaccounted for and believed to be hostages as well. So the Israeli government has notified 200 families, but it could be more as of now because many people are still missing. And as I said, there's a maze of these tunnels inside Gaza, which is obviously called the Gaza Metro. And a lot of it is unknown. So once the ground assault really begins and there is building to building movement, room interventions, etc., they're going to obviously use the bombs to explode these tunnels. But will these hostages become casualties in that process? Because it's going to be a very tricky road ahead. Because the IDF today has said and suggested that once the ground assault begins, it would be unlikely what the public expectation is. So one has to wonder what the IDF game plan really is.
In fact, Seymour Hersh, the very famous US investigative journalist, came out with an article a few days back, where just 2 days back, in fact, where he's spoken about this Israel being caught between a rock and a hard place, with the hostage situation on the one hand, and the fact that they're not so sure of pushing in so many conscripts, so many new, fresh recruits, the weekend warriors into Gaza. And he says that is primarily the dilemma of facing the Netanyahu government. How do you see this? I mean, has any government in all of history faced the kind of dilemmas that Benjamin Netanyahu faces today?
Anybody who visits Israel, one thing strikes very clearly is that all of them are very military-like because they have served the military. Even though the frontline soldiers are largely teenagers, you can call it a teenage army. But I suppose what they have been hearing from the parents, what they've been trained for in these academies, I have visited a couple of them where teenagers, young girls were being trained. I think largely they have understood how to use technology, and they have also understood what their middle or older generation has been up to. So once the new conscripts, the current, those who are serving in the barracks are available, and the reservists who join them in, and I think would be able to forge good mixed experienced units, which will possibly go in, and how they decide to go in. They have special forces, and special forces are more regular troops. And I don't think so they are going to send lakhs and lakhs of army, like normal conventional military attacks. No, I think what they are going to do is they are going to make sure that they get success inch by inch.
So it's going to be like intelligence-based operations
intelligence-based, focused operations. So really speaking, if you gauge the mood of the Israeli army today, there is a certain definite calm. because they, I think, are completely focused.
Right.
They're getting regular intelligence and information. I think their older colleagues who were serving now elsewhere in various technology companies and high-tech firms have joined them in. Most of the industry is more military-like.
Right.
And I suppose huge amount of defense military complex is going to be very supportive in small R&D come, innovation mode.
Right.
And I think Israel is very good in innovation. So if they find that there is a new challenge, I think they would come out with innovate a new methodology.
Right.
And I suppose this is going to give a birth to the new Israel.
Right.
And I think they would largely redeem their lost image very quickly because the ability to reinvent themselves.
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
suppose
That's tremendously
from military
resilient.
to technology to industry, everything is going to be reinvented in a very short time.
Absolutely. In fact, our reporter Manish Jha is on the ground there at the Rafah crossing, and he's kind of, tried to gauge the mood, the josh among the IDF soldiers. Let's listen in.
ऑपरेशन से ठीक पहले अपना जोश बढ़ाते हुए एक दूसरे का सैनिकों को देखिए जो इस वक्त ऑपरेशन से पहले किस तरह जोश में और समझिए कि वो हमास को क्या मैसेज दे रहे हैं। वो साफ तौर पर ये कह रहे हैं कि वो तैयार हैं उस लड़ाई के लिए जो इजराइल के लिए, इजराइल के अस्तित्व के लिए सबसे बड़ी और खतरनाक लड़ाई हो सकती है। और उसके लिए इस वक्त आप देखिए, जब कहते हैं आप कि हाउ इज द जोश, तो ये देखिए जो जोश इनका इस वक्त आपको दिखाई दे रहा है। ये सोल्जर्स जो इस जगह पर मौजूद हैं और उनके बीच आपने देखा कि किस तरीके से ये सब एक दूसरे के साथ अपना मनोबल बढ़ाते हुए और एक दूसरे को सपोर्ट करते हुए, क्योंकि इन्हें पता है कि ये किस असाइनमेंट पर जा रहे हैं और वो असाइनमेंट कितना डेंजरस होगा। सो आपने इनके जोश और जज्बे को देखा और इसी जज्बे के साथ ये ग्राउंड ऑपरेशन के लिए आगे बढ़ रहे हैं और इन्हीं लोगों को आगे जाकर गाजा स्ट्रिप में सुरंगों के भीतर से घुस कर हमास के आतंकियों को सफाया करना है। इन्हीं लोगों को उन बंधकों की रिहाई करनी है। इन्हीं लोगों को जाकर अपने दुश्मनों के बीच में से जाकर अपने इजरायली लोगों को छुड़ा कर लाना है। और उससे पहले ये लोग एक दूसरे का मनोबल बढ़ाते हुए यहाँ पर ठीक बॉर्डर के पास मौजूद हैं, जहाँ से हम आपको दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं इनके जोश को, इनके जज्बे को, ताकि आप देख सकें और समझ सकें कि अभी फिलहाल इजराइल के बॉर्डर की स्थिति क्या है। बॉर्डर पर अलग अलग हिस्सों में जाते हुए TV9 की टीम को एक ऐसी लोकेशन पर आने का मौका मिला है जहाँ पर कि सैकड़ों की संख्या में हम सोल्जर्स को भी देख रहे हैं और यहाँ पर कुछ जो संस्थाएँ हैं वो यहाँ पर खाने का और दूसरी जो चीज़ें हैं वो इकट्ठा कर रही है। हाय सर, so I am Manish Jha from TV9. I am coming from India.
Nice to meet you.
So what is going on here?
Actually, what's happening here is going on very fast. We started last Sunday, a group of 6 people. We made 300 dishes. We bring our own money to start to do something good for the army. By Monday, we were 12 people, and we made about 600 dishes.
Can you show us how you guys are doing?
Of course, and by Thursday, we became a group of 500 people, making 10,000 dishes a day, only for the soldier who fight. Let's see.
Okay, और मैं आपको बता दूं कि सिक्योरिटी की वजह से हम लोग लोकेशन नहीं दिखा रहे हैं कि हम कहां पर हैं, ये नहीं बता रहे हैं। यहाँ पर जो दर्जनों की नहीं बल्कि सैकड़ों की संख्या में जो सोल्जर्स हैं उनको किस तरह से वो खाना प्रोवाइड करा रहे हैं और फिर ये लोग खाने के पैकेट सब लेकर और फिर यहाँ से वो आगे बढ़ते हैं, क्योंकि ठीक यहाँ से कुछ दूरी पर स्थित जो लोग हैं जिनको युद्ध में यहाँ पर डिप्लॉय किया गया है उन सबको खाना मिल सके उसके लिए। ये एक ऐसी जगह है क्योंकि जंग के दौरान आपको सब कुछ चाहिए, आपको हथियार चाहिए, आपको तमाम तरह के रसद सामग्री चाहिए, लेकिन साथ ही साथ आपको खाने पीने की चीज़ें भी चाहिए, क्योंकि किसी को नहीं पता कि ये जंग कितनी लंबी चलने वाली है। और वैसी स्थिति में जब आप जंग के दरमियान देखते हैं कि किस तरह से आम लोग, आम इजरायली, तमाम जो इजरायली लोगों का संगठन है वो किस तरह से आगे बढ़कर अपने सैनिकों की मदद कर रहा है, क्योंकि उन्हें पता है कि जो लोग इस वक्त मातृभूमि की रक्षा के लिए आए हैं उनको वो इसी रूप में शायद मदद कर सकते हैं। What's your good name?
We're both Alma.
Okay. So would you like to say something? What you guys are doing?
We're helping and making food for the soldiers.
Okay.
And hope for the best for Israel. And yes.
तो आप इस वक्त देखिए एक तरफ अलग एज ग्रुप के लोग हैं, अलग अलग एज ग्रुप के लोग इस वक्त यहाँ पर मौजूद होकर अपने सैनिकों की मदद कर रहे हैं और वो मदद करने के लिए उन्हें लग रहा है कि अगर वो कुछ नहीं तो खाना पीना ही प्रोवाइड करके मदद कर सके। क्या है इजराइल की तैयारी, कितना है इजराइल के लोगों में जोश, क्योंकि उन्हें पता है कि ये उनकी वो लड़ाई है जिसके लिए हर इजरायली को आगे आना होगा। हर इजरायली हर रूप में, किसी के हाथ में हथियार है तो कोई बॉर्डर पर जा रहा है, तो कोई बॉर्डर पर जाने वाले लोगों को खाना और दूसरी चीज़ें मुहैया करा रहा है ताकि वो इस देश की रक्षा के लिए, अपने तमाम इजरायली लोगों की रक्षा के लिए पूरी ताकत के साथ लड़ सके। इस वक्त टीवी 9 की टीम आपको वो दिखाने की कोशिश कर रही है कि देखिए किस तरह से आम इजरायली और सैनिक एक दूसरे के साथ हैं। यहाँ पर लोग गाना गा के भी मनोबल भी बढ़ाते हैं, खाना पीना भी दे रहे हैं और यहाँ से अपने सैनिकों को विदा करते हैं फ्रंट लाइन पर जाने के लिए, इस उम्मीद के साथ कि अगले वक्त खाना खाने के लिए दोबारा से सोल्जर्स यहाँ पर पहुँच सके। तो यहाँ पर एक आराम करने की भी जगह है और साथ ही साथ यहाँ पर देखिए सबके लिए ये अस्तित्व की लड़ाई है और इस बात को समझते हुए हर कोई अपने अपने हिसाब से इसे कंट्रीब्यूट करने में लगा है ताकि इजराइल जो अपना इतिहास रहा है उसी इतिहास को दोहराते हुए एक बार फिर इस मुश्किल की घड़ी में तमाम संकटों का सामना करके आगे बढ़ सके।
So there, as you see it, the Josh seems to be very high among the IDF, as you just mentioned, and they're raring to go. But Aditya, do you think there is going to be a ground invasion, or is it, as we are saying, is it on pause right now?
Currently, it's on pause due to multiple factors. One, of course, being that Biden is going to visit Israel on Wednesday.
Right.
And once that visit happens, only after that we'll see any troop movement or ground invasion in Gaza. We also have been seeing over the last 5 days a lot of diplomacy at play. We've seen Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, visiting Israel, but also visiting UAE, Saudi, and also holding discussion with the Egyptian president. So there is a humanitarian corridor that is being planned by the United States. And this is the kind of a diplomacy that US plays. On one hand, completely supporting Israel with military and saying that Israel has the right to defend and it will support its targeting of Hamas. On the other hand, also creating a humanitarian corridor in Gaza, because obviously there would be pressure from the Arab Street that these 23 lakh people need to be evacuated from the Rafah crossing. There are a lot of host of trucks that are waiting there as well. Let's remember there's a food, water and fuel crisis that is developing in Gaza. Apart from that, the UN came out with a statement that was deleted later, which said that Hamas had taken over their medical supplies, food, fuel, and a lot of other things. So there's a crisis, there's a chaos out there on the streets of Gaza. There were reports that the Hamas was also not allowing a lot of civilians to leave because obviously often they use civilians as human shields as well. But as of now, it's a tricky situation because it will take a few days to evacuate a lot of people from there, and that's what the US is ensuring. And I feel that immediately after Biden visit, it may not begin. The airstrikes might begin, which are on hold, but perhaps in the next 5 to 6 days, we might see a ground invasion.
There would be a ground invasion, you're saying that, and this would be in the manner that we were speaking, that soldiers would go in and they would hold ground. But the US, Aditya, very clearly, President Biden has told the Israelis that you're not to go in and hold territory again, not to reoccupy Gaza again. So how does that change?
That's the catch-22 really, isn't it? Because once the population really moves out, at least the majority of it, and already Egypt and other countries in the neighborhood have said that we are not going to take refugees. So if the people leave into Egypt, where are they going to go? They are clearly nowhere people. Are they actually going to enter West Bank or look for any other area for refuge? So as of now, that's a crisis unfolding. Apart from that, Israel is very clear. They're going to destroy Hamas completely from Gaza and ensure that. So in the next few weeks, we are going to witness that. It won't be perhaps a 48-hour or a 72-hour operation. It's going to be a long operation. And perhaps there will be an occupation. But how long? That's not clear yet.
But you, Gen Pannu, you were earlier on, you were explaining this scenario that, and it kind of brought to mind what Mao Zedong said about guerrillas, that they operate as fish among water. And you seem to indicate that this process would be filtering out the people from the terrorists. How long does this operation that you spoke of, how long will it take actually to execute?
I suppose one way of doing it is if you look at the shape of Gaza Strip, north-south. In a way, I think Israelis have already warned the civilians to move out to the south.
Right.
What they're indicating is that the population which needs to save itself, and in any case, as we were talking about, that the supplies are coming from the south, from the Egypt side. If you want food, water, survival, move south. But if you want to remain there, be prepared for the consequences of staying back.
Right.
So I suppose they will try to trigger this entire mobilization of population from north to south.
Right.
Because the Hamas, it seems, is more headquartered and located towards the north. Gaza City is like old Delhi.
Right.
Now imagine if you have to fight through the built-up area, along with the tunnels. It is going to be very, very complex operation.
That's literally two cities, right? There's a city underground and there's a city above it. Right?
Imagine, and then how do you communicate? The radios won't work.
Yeah. Oh, yes, of course.
Because signals, won't travel.
Right.
Once you start sending troops inside, you don't know where they have taken a bent and where either they've got lost or eliminated. It is not easy to survive subterranean battle in a protracted manner.
Right.
So those who have actually stored their ammunition, their rations, and are pitched, to fight a battle there, would find it easy to operate because they know when to come up, breathe, where, and then go inside and fight. So I think that will go in favor of Hamas initially.
Right.
But I suppose once the movement of population happens to say the innocent civilians move out, the children move out, so they would assume that anybody who's left behind is a warrior. And I suppose that is where large plastering can start at both levels, the upper and the subterranean level.
But then wouldn't Hamas, take their human shields with them and kind of move south? I was just reminded of what the LTT did, if you remember, almost 15 years ago in 2009, when they took the entire civilian population with them and used them as a kind of human shield when the Sri Lankan forces were advancing. Do you think something like that could actually unfold here as well? Or they're safe underground?
No, you see, if the Hamas was to mix around with the civilian population and move southwards, I would assume that Israelis have sufficient information on who's Hamas, who's not Hamas.
Right.
And I suppose they would want to separate these two if they put a filter there.
Right.
How they put a filter there, it's really there are many ways of doing it. But if they put a filter there that let the innocents move down south and have access to water and other amenities of surviving, but those who are left behind, I suppose again they will segment that portion and try to separate Hamas from hostages and from the innocents. Very complicated.
Right.
Fighting wise, technology will be tried at its best. I think innovation is going to be tried at its best, but it is going to be very messy. And as Aditya is saying, it's a catch-22 situation.
Right.
Sometimes you have to lose to gain, and sometimes you have to gain to lose. So I really don't know. The discretion is going to be of the soldiers, the commanders on ground, the politicians who are going to take this call. I think these are challenges after challenges. But I suppose when you go to war, you have to pay the cost of going to war.
Right.
But I think this war is going to be very complicated because nobody is going to really benefit out of expansion of the conflict.
Absolutely.
This is going to be devastating for the region. It is going to be devastating for the world. And I suppose that is why so much of diplomacy and so much of speed dating
as you said. So, challenges after challenges, General Pannu. Thank you very much for your clarity and your insights, gentlemen. It's a pleasure talking to you as always. And that's all we have this evening for the News 9 Plus show. Stay tuned as we cover the conflict in Israel.